Earth was dying beneath a sky full of fire. The alien ships came without warning, burning through the clouds with their cold silver holes and slicing cities apart with beams of blue light. People screamed, ran, vanished. The oceans boiled in some places, and others turned to ash. Humanity's greatest weapons barely scratched the invaders. Above the planet, the last surviving warship, the Iron Resolve, floated through the ruins of Earth's shattered fleet. Its hull was scorched, its systems failing, and its crew exhausted, wounded, and angry. Captain Elias Voss stood on the bridge, his eyes fixed on the enemy flagship in the distance. He was a tall man with gray hair and scars across his face, the kind of man who had seen too much war and never flinched. The crew around him moved quickly, some shouting updates, others working to keep the ship alive. Sparks flew from damaged panels. The lights flickered. Even now they weren't safe. Lieutenant Mara Jin, sharp-eyed and steady, called out a signal-and escape pod floating nearby, damaged but giving off life signs. Voss didn't wait. He ordered the pod brought aboard, curious and cautious. In the hangar, the crew opened the pod and found a strange figure inside an alien woman. Tall and beautiful, with glowing white hair and skin the color of moonlight. Her body was marked with glowing tattoos, like stars on her arms. She was unconscious at first, weak and barely breathing. But when she awoke in the medbay, her first words were not an attack or a threat. She looked around in fear and confusion, eyes wide as she tried to understand where she was. Voss walked in to see her himself, calm but guarded, wanting answers. But something strange happened. The moment her eyes met his, she stopped breathing. She stared not at his face, not at his weapons, but at his arm. A name was tattooed on Captain Voss's forearm, a name written in Old Earth script. The alien woman looked at it like it was a ghost. Her lips trembled. Her voice was soft, but it cut through the silence like thunder. "That name, it's mine," she whispered. The room froze. No one moved. No one spoke. Captain Voss didn't understand, but he felt the weight of her words. The alien woman didn't look like she was lying. She looked like someone who had just found a piece of herself she didn't know was missing. That moment changed everything. It wasn't just a war anymore. It was a mystery, a connection, question that needed an answer. Who was she? She recognized the name? And what did it mean for Earth's fight to survive? The fire still burned outside, and the enemy was still hunting them, but for a brief second, inside that broken ship, something else had begun, something far more important. The war had brought destruction, but now it might bring truth. Maybe, just maybe, a chance to fight back. The alien woman sat quietly in the medbay, her glowing eyes still fixed on the name tattooed on Captain Voss's arm. Her voice, when she finally spoke again, was low and uncertain, but full of something deeper: memory, pain, maybe even fear. She said her name was Leora. She didn't know how she knew that, but it came to her the moment she saw the name on his skin. It was like a door had opened in her mind, and light had begun to pour through. She said the name felt familiar, like something she had lost long ago. Voss listened without interrupting, trying to stay calm even as the questions grew louder in his mind. She didn't look like any species Earth had known, but there was something in her voice, something human. She told him she had been taken by a race called the Vexor Dominion, creatures that didn't speak or negotiate. They didn't conquer planets for power. They destroyed them and harvested what they wanted. They had no mercy, no faces, just endless machines and ships that swarmed across the stars. Leora said she had been one of many taken long ago. Her body changed, her memories wiped, her purpose rewritten. She had escaped them somehow, though she didn't remember how. But something inside her had survived a broken piece of the past that refused to die. That piece was her name. And when she saw it on Voss's arm, it came back. Voss asked her why he had her name, but she didn't know. She guessed maybe they had known each other before she was taken. Maybe he had tried to save her. Maybe he had loved her. The idea left the room silent. He looked down at the tattoo, running his fingers over it. He had gotten it years ago, after someone he had loved vanished during a failed mission in deep space. He had never forgotten her, though no one believed. She was alive. Now, this alien claimed to be her. Leora's voice broke through the silence again, softer now, almost afraid. She said the Vexer were not just enemies of Earth, they were the end of all things. They moved across galaxies, destroying and consuming. She had been connected to their mind for a long time, part of their communication web, and she had seen. What they planned Earth was only the beginning. Voss leaned forward. If she had been part of their network, then maybe she had knowledge, something they could use to strike back. He asked if she could help them stop the Vexer. Leora nodded. Slowly, but warned that it would not be easy. Their power was vast. Their ships were stronger. Their minds were connected across time and distance. But she knew where their core was, their heart, the place all orders came from. Destroy that, and the Vexer would collapse. But before Voss could say more, the alarms screamed across the ship. Red lights flashed. Lieutenant Mara Jin called out. From the bridge, Vexer ships were inbound, closing fast. They had found the Iron Resolve. They were coming for them. Voss looked at Leora, who stood slowly, her face pale. She didn't need to be told. She could feel them. She said they were not just attacking the humans, they were coming to take her back. She had broken their chain. Now they would do anything to erase her. Voss moved quickly, ordering the crew to prepare for escape, but he couldn't take his eyes off her. The alien woman who claimed to be someone he once knew, the woman who carried the key to the enemy's destruction, the woman who had whispered a name that had been burned into his skin long before this war had begun. The Iron Resolve shook as it raced through the wreckage of Earth's broken defense ring, engines pushing to their limit. Behind them, 3 Vexer warships chased with deadly speed, their weapons lighting up space with green fire. Captain Voss stood firm on the bridge, barking orders as the crew worked under pressure, trying to stay one step ahead. The ship was already damaged from earlier battles, and another hit could tear them apart. Lieutenant Mara Jin called out enemy distances. An incoming fire, while smoke curled from cracked panels and wounded crew members held their posts with bloody hands. Voss ordered the ship into a dense field of destroyed satellites and ruined battleships, hoping the debris would hide them. It was a desperate move, but they had no other choice. As they flew into the twisted metal field, beams of energy flew past, barely missing the hull. Inside the medbay, Leora stood watching the chaos unfold on a small display screen. Though still weak, her posture had changed. She wasn't just a victim anymore. Something deeper had awakened inside her. She could feel the Vexer ships chasing them, feel their thoughts pressing against her mind like a storm on the edge of breaking. She walked onto the bridge, silent and calm. The crew looked at her with mixed fear and awe, but no one stopped her. She moved beside Voss and said quietly that the Vexer would never stop. Not while she lived, he asked her. Again, why were they after her so badly? What did she hold that made her such a threat to them? Her answer silenced the room, she said. She had been part of their core communication network. Her mind had once been wired into the very system the Vexer used to control their fleets. During that time, she had seen everything: battle plans, weaknesses, even the hidden location of the Vexer's control world. She didn't remember it clearly at first, but seeing her name on Voss's arm had unlocked more than just emotion. It had broken part of their hold over her. Now, pieces of their secrets were returning. The Vexer were not just powerful because of their weapons, they were unified through one great system, one brain that spanned across ships, planets, and stars. If that system was destroyed, their control would shatter. Voss stared at her, stunned. Humanity had been fighting blind, losing world after world. But now, they had something the Vexer feared: a path to strike back. Mara Jin asked how they could reach that place if no human ship had ever seen it. Leora answered simply, she could take them. She knew the path, hidden between slip lanes and old stargates that humans didn't even know existed, but the journey would be dangerous. And the moment they entered Vexer space, they would be alone. Voss made his decision without hesitation. He ordered the ship to change course and told the crew their mission: follow Leora into enemy space and destroy the Vexer core. The crew didn't argue. They had lost friends, homes, and entire cities, and they had a chance to end it. The ship powered through the last of the debris field, barely escaping another blast. Voss turned to Leora and asked one last question. Was she sure? Could she really take them to the heart of the enemy? She looked at him, her eyes glowing softly, and nodded. She said she didn't know who she had been before, but she knew who she wanted to be now. Not a weapon, not a prisoner, a fighter. And if that meant flying straight into the storm, then she would lead the way. The plan was madness, but it was the only hope left. The crew of the Iron Resolve gathered in the hangar, standing among scorched walls and broken machines, their faces tired but full of fire. Captain Voss stood before them, his voice steady and strong, explaining what they were about to do. He told them that Leora, the alien woman they had rescued, once connected to the Vexor's central mind, had found the location of the enemy's control world, a hidden place deep inside a swirling nebula no human had ever entered. That world wasn't just another base or city. It was the heart of the Vexor network, the brain behind their fleets. If they could reach it and destroy it, the Vexor would fall into chaos, losing the unity that made them unstoppable. Voss didn't promise survival. He didn't offer glory. He only gave them the truth. They had one ship, damaged and alone, against a force that had already burned half the galaxy. But they also had something the enemy didn't: will, rage, and a reason to fight. The crew listened in silence. Then one by one they nodded. No one stepped back. Every man and woman on that deck had lost something: families, homes, futures. Now they had a chance to strike at the ones who took it all. Leora stood near Voss, no longer wearing a blanket or walking weakly. She had changed, her body stronger, her voice clearer. Her glowing eyes held both fear and purpose. She told the crew about the hidden warp gates and ancient slip lanes the Vexor used to travel quickly. She had found a narrow path through forgotten space, and it would take them straight to the enemy's core. They would have to fly through the outer edge of a dying star system, through radiation storms and asteroid fields. No safe routes, no help. But the path was real, and if they followed it, they could strike where the enemy never expected. The Iron Resolve powered up again, engines humming low and steady, shields flickering to life. Systems were patched with whatever they had, weapons reloaded with the last of their ammo. The ship turned from the edge of Earth's shattered orbit and entered the slip lane. Leora opened for them. The stars stretched into lines, and space folded around them. When they came out, they saw a green and gold nebula that swirled like a storm cloud, and within it, a planet-sized structure floating in silence. Rings of metal circled it like chains. Lights pulsed along its surface in slow, steady beats, like a giant heart. Round it hovered hundreds of Vexor ships, silent and still for now, like a fleet waiting for orders. Leora whispered that the world below was not just made of machines. It was a machine, alive in its own way, built to think, control, and command. Voss turned to her and asked the final question. What did they need to do? She said they had to get close. Too close. Close enough to send a pulse into the network using her Link 1 final connection that would overload its core. But she warned them again. If she made that link, she might not come back. The Vexor would try to stop her from within. Her mind could be destroyed. Voss looked at her with something deeper than duty in his eyes. He didn't want to lose her again. But he also knew what was at stake. He placed a hand on her shoulder and said simply, "Then let's make it count." The ship surged forward, engines roaring, heading straight into the lion's mouth. Alarms started flashing on the enemy ships. The Vexor had noticed them at last. But the Iron Resolve didn't slow down. Humanity had been running long enough. Now it was time to fight. The Iron Resolve flew like a spear into the heart of the Vexor stronghold, its engines burning bright as enemy ships closed in from every side, filling space with green light and deadly fire. Captain Voss stood firm on the bridge, shouting orders. As the ship shook from the impact of enemy blasts, hull panels split, alarms screamed, and the shields flickered under constant attack. Still, they pushed forward, heading straight for the massive control spire that rose from the surface of the machine world. The spire wasn't just tall, it was alive, pulsing with energy, sending signals to every Vexor ship in orbit. It was the brain, the voice, the power behind the enemy fleet. Mara Jin called out enemy positions while crew members held their stations, many injured but refusing to leave their posts. The enemy was stronger, faster, and better armed, but the humans didn't care. They had one mission: to strike the enemy where it hurt most. Voss ordered all forward weapons to fire, and the ship answered with a roar, sending blasts of red-hot energy into the closest Vexor cruiser, ripping it apart. More enemy ships moved to surround them, forming a cage of death. Just as it seemed, they would be trapped. Leora stepped forward from her station. She had already connected part of her mind to the ship's systems and was now ready to do what only she could. She said there was one way to stop the fleet, one way to make the Vexor ships lose control. She would have to fully link herself into their network, find the command signal, and shut it down from the inside. But it was dangerous. The Vexor would sense her, and they would attack her mind. If she failed, she might die. If she succeeded, she might still not come back. House looked at her, and for a moment the war faded. He remembered the woman she used to be, the scientist he had loved, the one he had lost to the stars. Now she stood before him again, changed by war and time, but still her. He asked her if she was sure. She nodded without fear. She said she was done running. It was time to fight back, no matter the cost. She touched the glowing panel and closed her eyes. Her body went still as her mind shot into the network. Inside, it was like falling through light. She saw memories that weren't hers, thoughts flying past like stars. The Vexor voices screamed as they felt her enter. She pushed deeper, searching for the core. On the bridge, Voss and the others held their ground as more enemy ships closed in. One more blast and the shields would fail. But suddenly, the enemy ships froze. Just for a second, but it was enough. Leora had found the signal, her mind touched. The center of the network, and with one last push, she sent a pulse of chaos through it. Ships turned the wrong way. Orders shattered, patterns broke. The Vexor fleet, so perfect and unified, began to fall apart. The spire below started to glow too brightly. Sparks jumped from its surface. Voss gave the final command: fire all torpedoes. They launched everything at the control tower. The explosions rocked the machine world. The spire cracked, light pouring out like blood. The enemy ships stopped moving completely, left drifting without orders. The heart of the Vexor was broken, but Leora didn't move. Her body was still glowing, but she was silent. Voss ran to the med bay where she lay connected to the system. He knelt beside her, took her hand, and whispered her name. Breathing was shallow, her face pale, but then her eyes opened, soft and full of light. She smiled weakly and whispered, "I remembered. Everything." The crew had done the impossible. They had flown into death itself and torn the Vexor apart from within. The battle was not over. But now, for the first time, humanity had hope. Inside the glowing chaos of the Vexor network, Leora's mind moved like a spark in a storm, surrounded by voices that screamed in fury and fear. She wasn't afraid anymore. The deeper she went, the more she began to remember, not just data and control codes, but memories buried deep inside her. She saw flashes of a life she had forgotten, a man's warm smile, the feel of sunlight on her skin, laughter in a Martian lab, and a name spoken with love. Elias Voss. Her husband. Her partner. Her past. She had not been born Vexor. She had been human, taken during a mission years ago, stolen by the enemy, changed by their machines, and used as a part of their mind. The Vexor had erased everything they could, but something had survived. One name, tattooed on her husband's arm, had been strong enough to break their control. That name had led her home. As her full memory returned, she realized the Vexor feared her not just because she was once one of them, but because she was something they could never be: human, full of love and choice, and no longer under their control. She turned her focus back to the network and began tearing it apart from the inside. She opened floodgates of power, reversed commands, shut down connections. Ships crashed into each other in orbit. Signals went wild. The Vexor, once perfect in movement and thought, became confused, broken, and blind. On the bridge of the Iron Resolve, the crew watched in disbelief as the massive Vexor fleet lost all formation. Enemy ships drifted, weapons offline, as if their minds had been stolen. Captain Voss didn't waste a second. He ordered every last torpedo to be launched at the control spire. The powerful blasts struck the spire's glowing surface, cracking. It opened like an egg. Light exploded from inside, sending shockwaves through space. The sky burned with alien fire as the enemy's core went dark. Leora's body, still lying in the medbay, began to fade. Her skin dimmed, her breathing slowed. The mental battle had taken everything from her. She had been strong enough to reach the center of the enemy, but the cost was high. Captain Voss rushed to her side, kneeling beside her, calling her name. With a voice that shook, he held her hand tightly, willing her to stay. For a moment, he feared she was gone. But then, slowly, her eyes opened. They weren't glowing like before, but soft and clear, filled with emotion. She looked at him and smiled, her voice weak but calm. She said she remembered everything, who she was, who he was, and the life they had shared. Voss held her like a man who had just seen a ghost return to life. The ship's crew, watching from nearby screens, stood in silence. There were no cheers, no shouts, just quiet respect for what had been done. Leora had not only helped stop the enemy, she had found herself again. The crew had destroyed the Vexor's core and shattered their control. The great machine brain had died. Across the galaxy, other Vexor fleets suddenly fell into confusion. Their perfect lines broke. Their weapons stopped, began to lose battles they had once easily won. For the first time since the war began, humanity was not the hunted. They were the storm. The Iron Resolve, battered and burned, began the long journey back to Earth. The ship moved slowly through space, carrying with it survivors, memories, and a woman who had once been lost among the stars. Captain Voss sat beside Leora's bed every day, watching over her, listening to her stories, reminding her of the home she had almost forgotten. Their fight wasn't over, but the tide had turned. Gay. And now, the galaxy would learn what it meant to face a united, angry, and fearless humanity. The Iron Resolve moved slowly through space, its hull damaged, engines humming weakly, but its mission complete. The crew worked in silence, tired yet proud, knowing they had done what no one thought was possible. The heart of the Vexor had been broken, and now their once perfect fleets were scattering across the stars, confused and leaderless. Battles across nearby systems began to shift. Human colonies that had gone dark suddenly found the enemy retreating. Ships that had been hiding came out of the shadows. Hope spread like fire. On board the ship, Captain Elias Voss spent every moment he could in the medbay. Sitting beside Leora, she was no longer glowing with alien light, but her eyes were calm and human again. Her skin had lost the cold shine of the Vexor, and her voice, though still soft, was filled with life. The crew gave them space. Understanding this was more than just the return of a soldier, it was the return of someone long thought lost to death in war. Voss listened to her as she spoke about the fragments of her memory slowly coming together. She remembered the red sands of Mars, the smell of engine oil, the way he used to laugh during late-night repairs, and how he held her hand before every mission. The Vexor had tried to erase it all, but love had left deep marks that no machine could fully destroy. That name on his arm, her name had become her anchor, pulling her back to herself when everything else was gone. Voss told her how he had searched for her for years, refusing to believe she was dead. He had the tattoo done the day he accepted command of the Iron Resolve, a reminder of why he fought. Leora cried quietly when she heard that, not out of sadness, but from a sense of being whole again. She had been made into something else, turned into a weapon and sent to serve a race that knew nothing of love or mercy. But through all that, her soul had survived. Now, free from the Vexor's hold, she had a second chance, not just to live, but to choose. Voss and Leora returned to the bridge together as the ship neared Earth's restored defense line. Other human ships were gathering there, some damaged, some new, all answering the call. Word had already spread of what the Iron Resolve had done. Messages from colonies and fleets began to flood in, full of thanks, support, and unity. When the ship docked, Voss stepped out onto the landing platform, Leora beside him. The Earth. Councils stood waiting, along with soldiers, civilians, and old allies. They expected a report. Instead, Voss gave a short, powerful speech. She spoke of loss, of courage, and of the power of memory. He told them how one name had brought back a soul, how one woman had broken the enemy from within, and how the fight was not over. But now they had the strength to finish it. Leora then stepped forward, and silence fell across the platform. Told them she had seen the Vexor's plans, seen what they would have done to every world, every species. She told them the Vexor believed humans were weak because they felt too much, because they loved and remembered. But that was not a weakness. It was their strength. Because in the end, it wasn't weapons or numbers that won. It was the refusal. To forget who they were, the crowd didn't cheer right away. Instead, they stood in quiet respect, honoring the pain and the fight. Then the applause began slow, then rising like thunder, rolling across the landing field and echoing into the sky. The Vexor were still out there, scattered and dangerous. But now, they were no longer gods. They were just another enemy and one humanity could defeat. The war wasn't over, but the light had returned. And it had started with a single name. Remembered by a man who refused to give up, and spoken by a woman who had found her way back through the dark.